if you're stuck at 200K, half a million, or maybe even hovering around 1.5 million in annual revenue, and you're wondering why suddenly it feels harder than ever to grow, you're not alone. You've hit a fundraising plateau, and no one talks about how brutal these plateaus can feel. They can feel like there's no way out, right? And it's just you're trying all these things, and no matter what, you're just kind of humming along at that same revenue level. So we're going to dig into that problem today, and I'm going to share with you how you can grow past it faster using the next generation strategy of fundraising. So 500,000 is a very common stall out zone that I see for organizations. We kind of see it at 500,000. We see it again at 1 million. And for my smaller orgs, keep listening today. Even if you're at 100K, very common stall out zone. There are these points, much like in a marathon, there are these points where you're like hitting your stride and you're feeling good. And there are other points where you're like, it is a grind. It is a slog. And so there are these points throughout your organizational's growth that are very, very common where we see the stall out. The stall out means that you've done the heavy lifting of growing. You've got your donor base. You've got a couple of signature events and campaigns, right? But now you're stuck between too big to be scrappy, but too under-resourced to scale with ease. You're like, the symptoms I see very commonly are we need to hire, I need more help, but we can't afford to hire. Or we have some amazing donors. We have major donors, we have recurring donors, but it's kind of like I'm tapping into them too much, or I really need them to perform. I really need them to give more. And Christina, I think that they're at capacity, right? So what I see is you're still operating like a startup in systems, outreach, and campaign style, but the stakes are higher. And so you've got this startup culture, which got you to where you are today and worked beautifully, but you can't continue that system. You can't continue that strategy and expect to raise 25% more, expect to grow year after year after year. And if you don't believe me, you don't believe how common plateaus are, I want to share a very sobering stat with you. This is from Candid. They have some amazing data in our sector, and I really appreciate their visualizations as well. And so they share that only 10% of nonprofits have revenues over 500K. Said another way, that means 90% of nonprofits do not raise more than $500,000 a year. The majority, the biggest piece of that pie, are under 500K. Okay. And so it's very, very common that we see these stall out points. We see it in what I would call the more emerging or beginner stage, that 0 to 500K. Then if you're listening, you're like, all right, no, we're on the other side of 500,000. We're chugging along. Then I see the stall that takes you from 500K to about 1.2 million. There's a stall there. Okay. Citing maybe things like capacity constraints again, like I can't do more, we can't do more, or major donor pipeline. Christina, we've got some major donors, but we don't have enough. We don't have enough. Or, sometimes we see that churn of like, we thought somebody was going to give that gift of 50K last year. And boy, that was a make it or break it because they were our most important donor. Right. And we also see this inconsistent strategy. Sometimes I'll look at y'all's 990s and I'll see your 4 years, and your 4 years is giving me major frowns because your 4 years of revenue are flatlined. Meanwhile, I know, and you know, that it costs more than ever to put on your program or service, right? To operate your program or service. So if you're bringing in $1 million a year and you have been pretty consistently, give or take, for the last 4 years, you're actually impacting less people if you are experiencing the same inflation that many of us are, right? Unless there's some sort of unicorn inside and your program or service has decreased for some reason in cost, most likely it's actually hurt you, that plateau. The other issue is average donor retention rate. Now, the stats are a little all over the place on this. So I've seen that 8 out of 10 donors only give one time. So that's about 20% of your donors stay on and give a second gift. I also have seen that the retention rate is somewhere around 42%. So that's a higher, but still not great. So staying still in either of those scenarios is falling behind, right? It's really important to think about your growth from a lead generation standpoint, so that means from a donor acquisition standpoint, right, that you need two things to happen in order for your revenue to, say, grow by 20% year over year. You need to retain more donors while also acquiring more donors. And I'm going to give you a branch off the retaining more donors. Step one is we need to retain them. Step two, maybe one of my most favorite steps, and we support you inside my coaching programs to do this, is we need to upgrade the donors. So if you have a donor who's pretty consistently giving, say, $2,500 a year, you can count on it. It's dependable. They like what you do. The $2,500 is great. Many of you are like, I don't want to rock the boat. But the work that we do, the work that we coach you on, the work that we support you to do is actually to unlock that most likely there's a capacity for 5,000, 10,000. We had, and so much more, so much of a higher gift. So upgrading donors is really important. We've had so many clients that we've supported inside my coaching program, the club, to do exactly this, where they have a portfolio of mid and major donors. And sometimes I'll say to them, we've got to remember together that $100,000 donor didn't typically go from giving a gift of $0 to $100K. They didn't go from non-donor to $100K donor, right? They stair-stepped, right? You cultivated them. And so that upgrading of the donors is really important. So I wanted to just go on a tangent and make sure that when we're talking about lead gen, I mention that part. Really, really important. Okay. Now I'm going to pull from hundreds, if not thousands at this point, of calls that I've had with so many organizations, whether I've had a discovery call with you, whether you've been on my webinars, whether you've asked a question live, whether you've submitted an email, you've messaged me on LinkedIn or Instagram. I have been on the receiving end of the belief system, I just need more staff. If I had more staff, then I could raise more. And I get it. It's like this chicken or the egg, right? But many times that is not an option for you. Many times there is simply not the budget for yet a new staffer. So then you become in this position where you say to yourself, okay, if I know I need to raise more, how am I going to do it? And that's the work that excites me, is like, okay, if we can't just plop a 1,000-person donor list on your desk, right? If we can't just give you a major gifts officer, right? If we can't do any of those things, if all items remain the same, how do we raise more? Because it's actually a solvable problem. You don't need 10 more staff members. You don't need a fundraising major gifts unicorn. You don't need to overhaul your mission. And you definitely, please hear me, because I've seen this as a trend lately. You definitely don't need to throw another gala. I recently had a call with somebody who was just knee deep, doesn't even describe how deep she was in event logistics. She had 2 back-to-back events she was planning. She was a small shop ED. She was completely overwhelmed. And the amount of event planning it took to put these on, she has no time to do anything else. And it is no wonder she is very behind on her year-to-date revenue. Compared this year to last year, she's spending way too much time planning events when she actually needs to be out there acquiring new donors, cultivating the donors she has, asking and repeating, right? So you don't need more staff. You don't need another event. Or maybe you're thinking, I just need to work harder. I need to just like head down, work harder, work more, whatever that is. But the truth is, maybe hustle got you here, but systems will get you there. Okay. So maybe working hard and like that sweat equity got you to where you are now. And we love that. But we cannot continue that and have you in this sector and happy and thriving and growing. That's where we layer on stronger systems and we layer on stronger strategy. Okay. Or maybe you're thinking we're too small for bigger gifts or ambassador strategies or influencer strategies. We're just too small. No one knows about us. We're the smallest shop in town, whatever your excuse is there, right? In fact, it's usually you're not actually too small. You're too quiet. You're not being big in the way that you're positioning yourself. You're not being big in your fundraising mentality. You're not being big in your asks. You're taking the $25 like a handout instead of bravely asking that same donor for $250 and doing it again and again and again. Or if you're thinking, listen, Christina, if we could just get one more grant, we'll be fine. And here's why that's a problem. Again, I think about the executive director that says to me, oh, well, last year we did 770,000. I'm like, that's great. What did you do the year before? Well, the year before we only did 500,000. Amazing. Tell me about that. Well, we got this grant and we're not going to be able to get it again. And it was restricted and we were only able to, it's like you got to peek behind the hood, right? And you learn that this one grant, this one windfall is not something you can replicate. It was something that was restricted, isn't actually helping guide you forward towards your strategic goals and plan, right? So relying on grants without a modern donor individual pipeline is a dead end. Hear me again. Relying on grants without a modern donor pipeline is a dead end. So here's what's actually happening. Let's kind of go over this scale friction that you're hitting. Again, I want to normalize it for you. It has happened in my business. It has happened in so many for-profit businesses. No sustainable, healthy organization, whether you're a for-profit or a nonprofit, I don't care, literally goes straight up, right? We actually want to see growth and then a little tiny stability. I don't want to call it a plateau, but a stability moment. So you can think about like a hockey sticks, right? We actually want that. That's where you stabilize. That's where you would actually, in that moment, bring on sometimes some extra help or support, right? But it goes straight up and to the right forever and ever, right? That isn't the goal that isn't the thing that we're looking towards, right? But more often, I'm not seeing either of those scenarios. I'm seeing the scale friction scenario where you hit the goal, you're at 500K and you stay there. The next year you do 520. The next year you do 495. The next year you do 515. You're just teetering. You're just staying there, right? And you're hitting that scale friction because old systems cannot support new revenue goals. Leadership is maybe too involved in daily fundraising. Donor messaging is generic and not high converting, meaning your donor messaging got you to where you can be now, but it is not going to attract a wider swath of donors and donor leads. Okay. So you may be able to get away with a crappy donation tool, mediocre generic messaging up to a certain point, but you will hit that ceiling. And that's when your donors and your leads are just waiting. They're like, can we know the people behind the organization? Can you say something that is new and different? Can you tell me more in your voice, in your, with honesty about the people that you seek to help, about your communities, about the services or programs, right? The people you serve. Like they're hungry for more and you're not giving them more. Okay. And maybe your board and community don't know how to plug in anymore because you haven't updated your fundraising operating system. So let's talk about the next iteration of fundraising. This is the shift to this next gen fundraising model. It's not about age. So we talked about that in a recent podcast. It's not necessarily about, I'm only saying this is how you acquire the next younger generation of donors. I'm actually saying this is how you acquire the next generation of your donors of all generations, the next generation of 20 somethings, 30 somethings, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 somethings, right? I didn't even mention the teens and tweens, our philanthro kids, right? This is about that evolution. So what modern fundraising organizations do differently are, one, they're building frictionless donor journeys to acquire, retain, and drive action to new and repeat donors. Said in layman's, they know that they constantly need to be generating new donors, new supporters, new ambassadors. They are aware that leads are foundational to their organizational's growth. So they may have 50 mid and major donors, but they know their goal is to get 100. Instead of sitting on that 50 going, we got 50, it's amazing. They know having people in their pipeline is key. They also know we're not going to be heavily reliant on solely our executive director to solve this problem or heavily reliant on our director of development. They know they need to get out of that solo shop fundraising mentality, that solo person fundraising, and instead flip it by fundraising with influencer and ambassador partnerships. Key here. Okay. So they're priming and activating their community instead of just cultivating endlessly. They're not in that transactional or reactive state of fundraising that sometimes I see with organizations where it sounds really frantic. Everything's an emergency, right? Because when you're behind on your goal, it ultimately does create a revenue emergency. They use bold storytelling, influencer marketing, and speed. They do not waste time going upstream unnecessarily for board buy-in, for buy-in from Joan in accounting, from buy-in from, Susie volunteer so that everybody thinks this new campaign is a great idea. No, they lead with innovation. They lead with speed. They focus on fast action campaigns using donor and honestly, consumer psychology, because consumers are donors and donors are consumers. Consumers who shop at Amazon, Nordstrom, Old Navy, their local flower shop, their favorite local cafe. Those are consumers. Those consumers are donors. Okay. And so the two must be treated the same. They expect this demand generation, the subscription economy. They expect better donor experiences. Okay. What else are these forward thinking nonprofits that are scaling right now, even in this climate, doing? Well, they run their fundraising like a campaign lab, not a calendar committee. They're getting shit done. You with me? They're getting it done. They're getting it done. They are not waiting for perfection. They are not waiting for the perfect little thing to tweak. They are not waiting for 10 committee members. If their committee said they'd help and they don't help, they do not wait on their committee and nag their committee. They go. They go. So you might be thinking, okay, Christina, yes, I'm with you. I'm with you. I want to be nimble. I want to do this next gen fundraising. But our board isn't on board. Let's take a big old pause here. And I want to ask you, and really, really mean this. Why are you asking your board in the first place? Why are you asking your board in the first place? Because you don't ask your board to approve every dollar spent on maybe program supplies, utilities, your website. Those are things already built in your budget, correct? You're not saying the electric bill was $45 higher. What do you think? What should we do? Right? Why are you handing over your authority in marketing and fundraising strategy? And this is so rampant. I find myself getting more and more fiery about this topic because I think it's a systemic issue that is keeping nonprofits under 100K and especially under 500K. Is this mom and dad, may I please run this campaign? And mom and dad in this instance are your board. That's actually not your board's job. And I really want you to start doing research on actual rules and regulations in your state to see what your board's job is, because your board's job is to approve the budget. Your board's job is fiduciary, right? Your board's job is not to come up with the marketing and fundraising strategy and not at all to roll it out, right? So let me break this down a little further for you. So if you're asking your board chair or your board president, who's an orthopedist, we've got a lawyer, orthopedist, and a CPA by day. They attend quarterly meetings for a couple of hours, and you're asking them for input and approval on a strategy they've never executed. That's not leadership. That's crowdsourcing from people who aren't in the day-to-day, and it's unnecessary. It is keeping you from making more money, from bringing in more donations. Like, let that sink in. Why are we asking for their approval? They trust you as the executive director, do they not? And you can go back and we'll link to Sabrina Walker Hernandez's episode here on the podcast. She had a great episode about really board dynamics, what boards should and should not do. And this is a really good example of why are we doing this? You know, when a well-meaning board member says on a Tuesday in May, hey, I have a fun idea. Let's do a 5K in June. And in June, you're rolling out that big campaign. You've layered on some forward thinking strategies. You've got your volunteers for your kind of pilot for your street team. And this will take you off that target. Next, you need to be able to say, what a fun idea, noted. No, here's what we've got going on in June. And here's how I'd love your help to get there, right? To execute. referring back to them, keeping them accountable. That's going to be really, really important here. Because imagine if Sarah Blakely, billion-dollar founder, creator of Spanx, she built a billion-dollar company, had asked her orthopedic surgeon whether she should spend $5,000 on Spanx branding or spend $4,000 on a marketing course or hire a leadership and executive sales coach for $8,000. If she had had those investments on the line and said to her mentors, a group of, in this case, we're going to call them board members, who are a surgeon, a CPA, and a lawyer, what do you think? They would have all said no, and they would have all been wrong. Okay, you with me? Or Whitney Wolfe Herd, she's the founder of Bumble. If she had asked a real estate broker, a banker, and a dentist if she should print 10,000 t-shirts with a provocative slogan to build her user base, they would have all been like, that makes no sense. Don't do it. I don't like the slogan. The t-shirts aren't cute. Can you go back to a vendor and get it for cheaper? They would have all said no. And they would have all been wrong because, by the way, that was one of the turning points to her getting a huge user base. She actually did this on college campuses. And next time you're on a Delta flight, go watch her masterclass. It's so good to hear about the ways that she created new users for her app. And ultimately, it was like skyrocketed to success. If she had asked, hey, should we spend this? Should we do this? What do you think of this strategy? Everybody wouldn't have gotten it. And that's okay because everybody's not supposed to get it. And we're also not talking about, billion-dollar or $100 million or $1 million expenditures here. My examples, I talked about 10K, 5K, 8K, still bold, still having a vision. But you are the one with the vision. You're the one responsible for sustainable growth. You don't need permission. And I want you to really step into deciding, where do I want to get permission and where do I not need permission, whether it's investing in support, whether it's creating a campaign that is new and different, helping to grow predictable revenue. It's really important. And if there's one theme I want you to get out of today's episode, it's stop outsourcing your leadership. It's you. It starts with you. Let your board start to see these results, right? It's going to change everything. So if you're thinking, we don't have enough staff to do more, this sounds great, but this sounds like it's going to take a lot of time. This next gen fundraising, I don't know where I'm going to get more donors in our pipeline. I don't even know where I'm going to get time to upgrade donors, right? You actually don't need more people, more staffers. You need a smarter system. Many times it's the system that you're using that is a time suck. That's why we teach high scalable systems and strategies like influencer marketing. We have a 60-minute campaign blueprint. That's where the precision beats the people power every single time. And there is a huge time suck happening in our mind. There is a huge time suck in the rumination, the thinking about it, the maybe in our mind. That is one of the, if not the biggest time sucks of your week. Okay. So I'm going to give you a personal example, which is I needed to send an email that I didn't want to send. And it was on my to-do list for about a week. The amount of time I spent just like checking in, looking at it, thinking about it, what should the email say? Now I'll send it later. If we were to like keep a stopwatch, I bet it was like, I don't know, an hour and a half, maybe longer. I'm embarrassed to admit, right? And I actually sent the email today, which is why it's top of mind. The amount of time it took me to write the email and press send, I'm not kidding, 45 seconds. 45 seconds. The rumination, the thoughts about it, the drama, the should I, the doubt, that's the time suck. And that's why I love coaching so much. That's why what I do is really a hybrid between consulting, where I'm really teaching you an in-depth strategy that you cannot get anywhere else, and coaching, where we're doing that inner work so you make progress faster. You get rid of that stress, that burnout cycle. Okay. If you're thinking, we just lost a big funder, we're scared to invest, we're thinking about it, working with you, Christina, this is actually why I want you to really go, oh, or is this the reason I should invest? So if you lost a big funder, if you lost out on a grant you thought you would get, if you had some sort of circumstantial change that is really stressing you out, continuing to do what you're always doing, kind of hoping for the best, that like even though this campaign's not different, we hope it'll raise more, or this in-person event usually raises X, but I just hope it raises Y, is not a strategy. Okay. You actually need a revenue engine that can include strategic growth, layering on those systems and support so that you never get stuck in the place you're in now, which is depending on a single funder to make or break your quarter, your year. Okay. So I've helped dozens of organizations break plateaus in 30 to 90 days, really hundreds at this point across my programs. We're not guessing, we're actually creating systems in real time with real donors, acquiring new ones, upgrading them. We have recurring giving that is a huge priority for many of you, and they're designed for leaders like you. At the time I'm recording this, I just finished up a launch for my email course, Easy Emails for Impact. And when I'm launching a specific program, I can get really enveloped in some of the outcomes we've created, of course, in that program. And right now I've been thinking about so much opportunity that you have simply with email. And that's a track we can put you through when we work together, right? We have clients who have used email to secure major donor meetings that have translated to $25,000 gifts and up just through email, just through I'm talking about a weekly newsletter. I'm not talking about dedicated cold pitch emails, right? So if you come to me and you're like, Christina, we lost a big funder, we're scared. What do? We can layer on a specific bespoke strategy for you. And for you, that may be, let's mobilize a street team. Let's do a street team campaign. Or sometimes it might be an opportunity where I'm like, we've got a lapsed donor email series we could do, or let's put your board through this engagement plan and let's get your board fundraising, right? So it has this dynamic energy to it. We had a client come to the club call this past week, and I could tell they were just going to hang out and just listen, which you are always welcome to do. You don't have to get hot seat coaching if you don't want it. But she ended up raising her hand and getting some coaching. And she left with a 3-pronged marketing and fundraising strategy to take her through end of Q3. And she started the call going, I don't really know how we're going to get here. I know what our fundraising goal is. We've got a couple of events we do. I know what our plan is, our vision, for the next 5 years. And I'm not really sure the next layers to get there. And we backed into her whole complete plan, starting with current donors, mid donors, individual donors, and then ultimately we built out even a sponsorship arm. This is the type of work we can do together, but it's really hard to do it when you're thinking, I've got to ask Joe, who is my orthopedic surgeon board member, what he thinks. You with me? Hopefully that resonated with you. And I just want to offer, wherever you're at, step one, just love it for a second, whether it's 100K, a million, whatever plateau, if you're experiencing a plateau, it's really important to appreciate what you've created. So go appreciate that. So if you're ready for that next evolution, this isn't about doing more. It's about doing different. You can go to splendidatl.com/start to choose your coaching path or book a free strategy call with me. I'll see you in the next one.